Welcome back to the Cultural Cookbook. This episode we're making Jocon De Pollo.
For this recipe, we are going to need some chicken. We use chicken thighs, water, salt, pepitas and sesame seeds, some chilies. We use serrano and jalapeno, cilantro, scallions and tomatillos, and a couple corn tortillas. We're going to put the water in with the chicken and salt and get that on the stove to start cooking and making a nice chickeny broth that we'll use later as well. And then we're going to get our tortillas prepped. We're going to cut them up into slices and then soak them in water while we get our other things ready to go. This is going to thicken the sauce up a little bit. As always, when I'm working with chilies, I have some gloves on, give everything a good wash, make sure it's nice and clean, take those tops off, and we're going to do fairly big pieces because we're going to get everything blended down in a food processor a little bit later. Take the bottoms off all the scallions, and then chop up the rest of that. Again, pretty big size pieces are fine because they are going to go in that food processor. For the cilantro, I chop up the whole thing, including most of the stems. I think it adds a nice flavor. The stems don't detract from anything.
Especially not when you're blending them up later on.
Yep. So you see tomatillos have a little husk on the outside, so we're going to take that off first, and then give them a wash. We're going to take the centers out like you would on a tomato. Interestingly enough, even though they look a lot like green tomatoes, they're more closely related to like a gooseberry, I think, which is kind of interesting. We're gonna just cut those into quarters and put them in with the rest of the veggies. So as we're going along, just taking a moment here and there to check on the chicken, make sure it's continuing to cook well. It's gonna make a nice broth. And then into a dry pan, we're gonna add our sesame seeds and pumpkin seeds and toast that over a medium-high heat, making sure to stir it so nothing burns until it changes color and starts to smell nice and roasty and toasty.
Now, do you cook your chicken high the whole time, or did you turn that down to a low simmer?
After it gets to a boil, you can turn it down to a simmer. So our seeds are going to go into a coffee or spice grinder, and we're going to grind it up until it's a fairly fine powder.
Make sure you've wiped out the coffee grounds and old spices from it so you don't have a different style spice profile than you're looking for.
Yes. Make sure your spice grinder is clean of all coffee flavorings. So our soaked tortillas are going to go into the food processor with that ground up seed mixture and all of our veggies. And that's going to go on the chop setting. As that continues, you can drizzle in some of the broth that is from the chicken liquid, just to make it a saucy consistency, just to make sure it blends up all nice and even. After your chicken is mostly cooked, you can pull it out of the water and shred it. I probably should have waited until it was a little bit less hot. This would have gone easier. If your chicken's still a little pink in the middle, right next to the bone, that's okay because it's going to cook in the sauce for a while. You could, of course, cook this until it was fully done in the middle, but if it's still a little pink, that's fine because it's going to go in the sauce for at least a half an hour. That's going to go into a pan with all of the ground up veggies and stuff, and a few more scoops of that chicken broth just to get it to the consistency that you want. Your goal is for it to be a slightly soupier sauce than just the chopped veggies would make. And then that's going to cook until it all comes together. I think probably about 30 minutes or so.
As always, check for seasoning. before you're getting ready to serve it. And what can I say? This turned out spectacular. We did not have very many leftovers. You get a little bit of the herbaceous greenness, you get the acidity, a little bit of heat from the peppers, and of course the chicken was cooked very well and it was still nice and tender. We really hope you'll try this one.
This is definitely a recipe that we're going to come back to. You could serve it with rice or in a tortilla like a taco. It was fantastic.
We also put it on top of chips with some melted cheese and made like a chilaquiles with it. So experiment, have fun, enjoy, have a great weekend.